the Catholic Men's Podcast, helping you find good works of literature for the Catholic gentleman. This is one of my favorite monologues in any book. Strangely, it comes out of a work of historical fiction called Snow Treasure by Marie McSwiggan. Without giving away too much information, it shows the hard reality of what happened to anyone unfortunate enough to be under Nazi occupation in World War II. This character's background story isn't fictional and is well documented to have happened countless times during the war. We have no idea how tough it was back then, especially for some Catholic countries, and I think this might shed some light on it. It did for me, anyway, as a young reader. This entire book filled my imagination with a series of seemingly conflicting emotions, a sense of awe at the adventure of it all. What a time to be alive! Sorrow for those persecuted by the Nazis, and a hatred for socialist tyranny. This true story revolves around the Nazi invasion of Norway and $9 million worth of gold bullion, which must be protected from the invaders at all costs. In fact, it has to be shipped to America for safekeeping. The crafty Norwegian resistance managed to smuggle out every gold brick on the ship Bomma, which safely docked in Baltimore on June 28, 1940. When the police escort to the bank asked the captain how they managed to pull it off, he said that Norwegian children had transported the gold bars hidden on their sleds right under the noses of German sentries and buried them in the snow on the beach. These dropsites were marked by a snowman to be picked up by the crew of the Bomma the next day. That much of the story, however incredible it may sound, is true. The adventures of Peter Lundström, the 12-year-old protagonist of this story, are historical fiction. The captain became Peter's uncle, Victor, and the ship became the Klang Persson. Now I'm going to pick up this story at my favorite part, when they only have a few more gold bricks left to transport. They're a few days away from victory. When Peter Lundström began unloading his gold bricks from the sled, Helga came over beside him and dropped on her knees in the snow. "Peter," she whispered, "I'm frightened. I heard something." "Heard something? What?" "Listen," she warned, still in whispers. "There it is again. It's even louder here than over by my snowman." "I don't hear anything." "Look, something moved in the bushes." She pointed to the far side of the fjord. They ran in the direction she pointed. They pushed through the snow-hung brush, but were stopped by the black water at their feet. They were unable to cross the angry rushing stream to the far side, where the snow made a thick screen over the heavier shrubbery. "If we could only get over, we could see the prints in the snow." "Are we being watched?" Peter asked. "I don't know. For the last week I've felt eyes on me every time I turned around." Late one afternoon, he was again unloading his sled. He untied his rope and removed the sack covering and placed the bricks in the hole he had made in the snow. He took 2 handfuls and began to make his snowman. He patted it hard. As he reached for more, something made him look up. It was just the merest noise, like soft breathing. He looked into a pair of blue eyes. Their owner was wearing the dull-colored uniform of a German infantry soldier. So it was all over. They'd been discovered. The Nazis knew what they were doing and had come to stop them. Peter knelt in the snow, trembling. The blue eyes under the fringe of fair hair were familiar. Even in his fright, Peter knew he had seen this private before. He'd seen him the very first day they'd passed the Nazi sentries. He had been helping unload the supplies. He was the one who had seemed to want to go sledding too. Then Peter had another surprise. The brush behind the soldier parted, and Uncle Victor sprang out. He grabbed the soldier's arms and pinned them behind him, and before he could make an outcry, he had a gag over his mouth. Behind Uncle Victor came Rolls, the mate. His revolver was pointed at the captive. When the latter made no effort to free himself, it was lowered. Then the men turned back into the brush toward the Klang Persson. Just to explain, the Klang Persson is their ship, and they've camouflaged it to make it look like part of the brush. It all happened so fast that no one but Peter saw. Not even Helga, a few feet away, knew what took place. She was hard at work on her snowman. "Helga, take my team back with yours?" Peter asked. "I want to see Uncle Victor." Helga wanted to see Uncle Victor too, and to go aboard the Clang, now that Peter knew where to find it. But Peter was president of the Defense Club. All of them had to obey him. When he refused to let her come with him, she had to do as he asked. Peter had no idea whether or not his uncle would allow him aboard the boat, but he was going to find out. What was happening on the smack was something no boy of 12 was going to miss if he could help it, so he hurried through the brush to the side of the water. From below the deck came strange sounds. Not to miss any of the excitement, Peter almost fell down the companionway in his haste. Uncle Victor and Rolls had untied the prisoner's arms and had taken the gag from his mouth. Then the captive soldier drew off his round army cap and threw it on the floor and trampled on it. He beat it with his feet, up and down, up and down. Then he tore at the insignia on his collar and tried to rip it off. All the while he was making hideous faces. "What is it, man? Speak! Your mouth is no longer tied," Uncle Victor commanded sharply. Then came a torrent of words, Norwegian and some other tongue Peter didn't recognize. "I'm no German, even if I do wear the uniform. I'm a Pole." "But what are you doing with the German army of occupation?" Uncle Victor asked. "They took me and made me serve them, and the deceit is theirs, not mine. I tell you it's not my fault, it's theirs. I'm no more to blame than that boy there." He pointed at Peter, and now Uncle Victor and Rolls saw him too. But Uncle Victor made no move toward Peter. He gave him a glance that seemed to say, "It's all right. At your age, I wouldn't have missed it either." "I want to go to the United States," the Pole went on. "If you'll take me on this boat, I'll cook and I'll scrub the decks. I'll sew the sails and carpenter. I'll stand watch. I'll do anything you ask. Only don't leave me here with those merciless machines, those Germans." "What's he talking like that for?" Uncle Victor turned to Rolls. "What makes him think I'd take a man in the German uniform anywhere? How do I know he's a Pole and hates the Germans? Does he think I'm a baby to take him on his own word?" Then he turned on the Pole and spoke severely. "Come now, tell us what you know. How long have you been following these children?" "If I follow these children, it's only because I'm lonely. It's because I want to be with someone I can like and trust. I will not make friends with the Germans. They don't even speak to me unless I can do them a service." Tears came into his blue eyes. "Come now, that's absurd. You've been following these children because you're spying on them. You want to find out what brings them here on their sleds. Then you go tell the commandant and win a promotion. I know your sly German tricks." "No, no, no! I have no sly German tricks. I'm a Pole. I have no love for the Germans. To me, they have done every wrong short of putting me to death. If I follow the children, it's not to do them harm." He spoke convincingly. Peter believed he told the truth. Even Uncle Victor seemed inclined to believe him, for his next question was put in milder tones. "But if you wanted to be with the children, why did you not make yourself known when you were here last week?" "I was on the other side of the fjord. I couldn't cross over." "But what were you doing in Holmes's barn?" Peter asked. "For it was you, of course." "If one is lonesome, even cows can be companions." Uncle Victor turned away. Peter spoke again. He was sorry for the captive and believed his story, but with so much at stake they couldn't afford to take chances. "But it was you who were in the condottieri the day you posted the notices about going back to school. Why is it you can have so much liberty and the others have to go back to the barracks?" "They don't have to go, it's by choice. When they found the Norwegians were ignoring them, they decided they would stay together entirely, and when the epidemic came, they were frightened." "Weren't you frightened too?" "Not I, because death, it is nothing. I live only that someday I can help my country. Poland is my country." Uncle Victor cleared his throat. If he was going to say something, the Polish boy didn't give him a chance. "But won't you take me with you to America? For surely that's where you're going." He looked about the cabin. "From the other side of the fjord, I saw the boat in its clever disguise. I knew you'd be sailing soon for that country. I'll be no trouble if you take me, and when I get there, I've a place to go. I have a married sister in Pittsburgh." "But that's utter nonsense," Uncle Victor protested, and his voice was again loud and angry. Even if I didn't think this some sly Nazi trick, how could I land you there? They wouldn't let you in without a passport." Uncle Victor wanted to know how his prisoner came to be wearing a German army uniform, and this is the story the Polish boy told. "My name is Jan Lasek. My home is in Krakow, near the German border. I was born the year of armistice, 1918, when Poland declared her independence. Until last summer, I was a student of languages at the University of Krakow. Always I wanted to go to America, where I could practice my English and study it further, but there were 6 in our family, and to spare the money was out of the question. My sister went to Pittsburgh to marry one of our countrymen. My grandmother was already living there. When grandmother died, she left me some money. The legacy was in a bank in Pittsburgh, and it was easier if I'd go there to get it, so I was to have a year of study in America after all. All last summer, when there were signs of trouble, my father would say, 'Jan, you go to America.' But I had a job tutoring and was making money, and so I waited until just before the University of Pittsburgh would open. I waited too long. The last week in August, I went to Geneva to take the boat for America. I had my ticket and my passport, but when I turned them in to go aboard, a strange thing happened. 2 men wearing police uniforms came up and took me by the shoulders. 'You're to come with us,' they said. I had to go along. There was nothing else to do, but instead of taking me where someone would tell me what was wanted of me, they threw me into a dark basement, and there I stayed for 2 days and nights without so much as a crust of bread or a drop of water. It was because they'd forgotten me. In the meantime, the Germans crossed into Poland and bombed, I think, 23 cities. But this I learned later. Then I knew only what I could guess from what had troubled my father and from the sound of the bombs dropping all around. After 2 days, they remembered about me and brought me food and water. I inquired what had happened, and they told me that Germany and Poland were at war. I asked about my ticket and passport, and they only shrugged. The boat left on schedule, they said. Jan Lasek was aboard. Little by little, I began to understand. They had wanted my passport for someone else. So I was locked up, and that other is masquerading in the United States, doing I don't know what harm. The men who arrested me were not Polish, but German secret police in uniforms they brought with them from their own country. For in the house where I was kept prisoner, I saw every kind of uniform or costume you could think of. There were disguises for clergymen, even the robes for a bishop. Men's formal dress included the ribbons and medals of a diplomat. For the women were all kinds of clothing, from the cap and apron of a parlor maid to the furs and jewels of a countess. One of the people in that house wore the black dress and inverted collar of a cleric. Here is one who will help me, I thought, before I knew about the disguises. This man of God will advise me in my troubles. One day, when I had a chance, I spoke to him. I am being kept here against my will, I said. Will you help me get back to my own people? He laughed to put me to shame. So you think I make a convincing-looking clergyman, he said, but you flatter me. When next time I saw him, he was wearing the uniform of a German Gestapo. But he didn't hold my question against me. I thought he seemed to like me, for he spoke to me often, which was more than the rest of them did. One time I saw him packing a valise, preparing to go away, but first he had to unpack it. He took out the uniform of a streetcar conductor. This is what I wore when I first came to Poland 2 years ago. He held up the cap for me to read the letters of its insignia, and then he showed me the code and trousers. From one of the pockets he drew out a book of streetcar tickets. I learned more about Poland in 1 year of riding the Warsaw tramcars than most people will know in a lifetime, and I found my knowledge very useful. I asked him why so many different kinds of dress were found in one house. But it's wise to have many changes of dress. Come, I'll show you. He opened a large wardrobe, and from it he drew out a suit of Scotch tweed. Plaid cap, rough shoes, and a heavy blackthorn stick went with it. Then he began practicing his Scottish dialect. Yes, the dress of a Scotsman was very, very helpful to me, he mocked. It got me into the British Embassy, and there I drew more than one piece of information out of the servants, information that was gratefully received at home. But who wears the nurses' uniforms, I asked. Who would wear them but our women agents? they get employment with an influential family where they can learn much that our country wishes to know. So what does it matter if the employer or the maid furnishes the uniform? It's only a few marks one way or the other. One of our girls was able to bring us information about a depot of ammunition our other agents didn't even know existed. It's been blown up, he finished. Spies, I said, entirely without regard of what he would do to me. But it didn't make him angry. He only shrugged his shoulders. Call us that if you like. We describe ourselves as patriots. Patriots? Yes, you can call yourselves that if you mean coming into a peaceful country and getting control of it by lies, sneakiness, bribery, and corruption. But that's the highest form of patriotic duty to one's own country, he said. And I'll say this much for him. He was speaking the truth as he knew it. One of these disguises was given me. It was the uniform of a German army private. I had to put it on or I'd be shot. But what do you want of me? I asked the woman who kept that house. Our Führer needs your passport for work of his own in America, she said. But why must I wear a German uniform? I asked. You ought to be glad to wear it. You might have been left to die in the basement. Why do I owe my life to this uniform? You were locked in. Nobody meant you should die of starvation, but you were forgotten about. We've more important things to think about than one Pole. But we needed someone who knew languages, not one or two, but many foreign tongues. Your papers say you are a student of languages, so you will be an interpreter for the army. Never, I said. My country's at war with Germany, and I'll do nothing to help an enemy. Don't worry, she said. In a short time, there'll be no war. Poland will have surrendered. One day I was taken out of this house, and with a body of German guardsmen, I was put on a train and sent south to my own city of Krakow. I was in Krakow for months after that. You can imagine my shame when one of the few old neighbors that were left saw me in a Nazi uniform. My father was dead. He was shot when he went to the assistance of an old priest who was dragged off the altar at Mass. My mother wasn't there. They said she got to Romania and took my little brother and sister. 2 of my brothers died defending our city. My home, I saw. There are hardly 2 bricks standing on top of each other. I make no mention of the humiliation of our people, or of how the Germans stole our money, our homes, our farms, and the very potatoes in our fields. I say nothing of what they did to our priests, or of how they took our young men and made them work at hard labor for themselves, nor of how they turned the women and children out of their houses overnight and sold those houses to people in Germany. All these things I saw with my own eyes. Me they treated with civility. I translate orders from the officers into whatever language is needed for posting to the civilian population. Polish there, Norwegian here. If I refused, they'd shoot me, and all the while I'm hoping to live for Poland. Norway has seen little. It's Poland that has suffered. Here you think the Germans are decent, and they have behaved better in your country than in mine. Perhaps it's because they think of Norway as a part of Germany, so they have not yet taken all your food and left you to starve. Poland they used as an example. It was to show what would happen to you if you didn't submit. Now you know why I'm not spying on you to tell the Germans and win a promotion. You know why I've watched your children, because if you belong to a country that has been invaded as mine has, then you are drawn in sympathy to people that have similarly suffered. You know now why I must get to America. Well, what are we going to do with him? Uncle Victor asked when Jan Lasek had finished his story. They had put him in the hold while they discussed the problem. We daren't turn him loose, that's certain, Rolls replied. We can't take the risk that he won't tell the commandant. He'd never do that, Peter said quickly. His story sounds true enough, Uncle Victor decided. I can well believe what he's told us. We know about the disguises ourselves, about men who came to Norway dressed as sports lovers, but who turned out to be secret police. But I think it's dangerous to let him go. Whether he meant to or not, he could accidentally say something that would put the Germans on our trail. But what shall we do with him? He'll have to be kept in the hold. We can't stand guard over him. I've a crew coming on tomorrow, but even so, I can't spare a man just to watch him." Rolls was laying the table for supper. Since it was so late, Peter was to spend the night aboard the Clang, and there was no place on earth he would rather be. His mother wouldn't miss him that night, for he was supposed to be at the Holmeses' farm. "Couldn't you take him with you to America, Uncle Victor?" Peter pleaded. "It's a shame he can't go." "But I can't take him without a passport. That's all there is to that," his uncle said shortly. "It would be a terrible thing to go that distance and be turned back at the end," Rolls explained. "I could sign him on as a sailor," Uncle Victor mused, "but he'd be interned because I'm not planning to return. I'm afraid that would be pretty hard on him after all he's gone through." I think that's a pretty good place to stop for now. So in the next episode, I'll be covering the capture of Peter Lindstrom and the end of Jan Lassek's story. Thank you all so much for listening, and Godspeed.